If you have ever done reverse engineering for CTFs or even for leisure, you probably heard of Radare. Originally designed as a forensics tool for recovering data from damaged disks, Radare2 has since evolved into a comprehensive toolkit used by security professionals, malware analysts, and researchers worldwide. Its flexibility and command line interface make it a popular alternative to commercial reverse engineering tools. Before any commercial reverse engineering software, such as IDA or Binja, Pancake started building his own tool. In this episode, he tells us why and how he came to develop Radare2. Sergi Alvarez, also known as Pancake, is the author of open source reverse engineering tool called Radare2 and the founder of security conference R2Con. Please welcome Pancake.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, so I just wanted to have a little chat with you because I heard about Radar or Radare. Could we clarify the way it's supposed to be pronounced, just for future references for everyone out there?
Yeah, I mean, probably the easiest way is just mentioning R2 because it's kind of like no way to pronounce it wrongly. But I like not to specify a single way for pronunciation the name of the project because I think that's a word that you can pronounce it very differently depending on the language, and I think that's a nice thing to hear.
Okay, so R2 then.
Yes. So in Spanish you will say radare, but many people
Radare.
in
Oh,
English
okay.
say radar or radari or whatever.
Where does the name Pancake come from?
Yeah, it's a long story. It seems to be kind of like a common question because at the time I started using it, I was basically using GPG for all my mails. And basically, the subject for the mails was dishes or different food or meals. And the body of the message was encrypted. So I decided to use a name of a meal as a nickname because that's kind of like a word that you will probably find a lot of matches and known for a person. But also because I was basically looking for words in English dictionary that like it the way that sound and the way that I can write it. And I ended up like picking this one, but they had like different nicknames in the past.
Okay, got it.
Actually, the previous nickname I had was Pop, which reminds me to your nickname.
True. Yeah, popsicle. I don't know why I chose that nickname. And I also spelt it wrong. I realized way later it's spelled like popsicle, but yeah, I say popsicle, but it's spelled wrong. Anyway.
Yeah, I also ended up like picking Truffaut, which was another nickname I had because in many social networks, Pancake was already taken, so I cannot use that nickname. So I ended up like using Truffaut, which was another nickname I chose for participating in a CTF, and was kind of like a mix between true and false. But yeah, it was kind of the first thing that I came to my mind at the moment. So not really long story behind that.
You used to do a lot of CTFs then?
Yes. So I started Radare as a tool for CTFs because I was lacking a lot of features in the tools that I was using at the time. GDB was not easy for scripting. IDA was not just expensive, but also I was missing a lot of things that, or at least workflows that I was expecting to work. And I'm not a mouse person, so I'm basically using the keyboard all the time. So yeah, I decided to just start a new tool for helping me on CTFs, and then I started to use it at work and on personal projects, and basically having fun with that.
Oh, okay. So can you tell me a bit more about your background then? How did you get into CTFs in the first place?
Sure. Well, I mean, my background started probably at 96, something like that, 1996. I started learning assembly and writing some viruses, also some command line tools for DOS. So I was really enjoying the coding in assembly. After assembly, I learned C. So my work, my my flow was starting from basic, then moving to assembly, and then jumping into C. And then after that, Pascal. So I was really having fun with analyzing viruses, writing antiviruses for the viruses that I found in my computer. And after that, I found out that there was a moment that I had to decide if I had to jump into Windows or Linux, because all the viruses seen was basically going into the Windows platform. But I was not really having fun there because of the dependency on the mouse, and also I prefer to depend on use free software. So I end up like getting away from the viruses scene, and then starting developing free software. Uh, then I started to work at a forensic company, and in the forensics company, I basically couldn't use the tools that I had at work for my personal needs. So I ended up like writing a small hexadecimal editor, which was the beginning of Radare, for carving a hard drive, and then dumping the hits, the keywords that I found in files in there. So I was basically starting the project for forensics use cases. But then in this company, I had some really good friends, and we ended up like meeting all together for participating in the DEF CON CTF. So I was basically extending the tool for being able to disassemble, debug, analyze, not just for dumping and carving memory. So it was started to become kind of like a Swiss knife for reverse engineering, also for exploiting, not just forensics. So and yeah, after that, I tried to use the tool at every single job I had. That was my excuse to have fun developing the tool. And also, my main purpose on this was basically to develop something that was free, and something that can be reused and well maintained by over time, because all the tools and projects that I saw at the time was basically not well maintained. Nowadays, it's kind of different, but at the time there was a lot of very cool projects, but they end up like dying after a few months. So I decided to just try to maintain something that I can use over time, and keep using it. So I also work optimizing codecs for the Fluendo company. So for basically for the GStreamer multimedia framework for Linux. So I was writing assembly code for PowerPC, Spark, MIPS, and Intel, optimizing different codecs for audio and video. So GDB was not helpful at the time for scripting, and I needed to basically automate the process of brute forcing and finding bugs by fuzzing the codecs in memory, in order to find out problems like unaligned memory accesses and things like that, using undocumented MIPS instructions and things like something that GDB was not supporting at the time, and probably nowadays the status for scripting is much better. But still, it was easier for me to just implement the thing in my own tool. So I was basically using it for debugging. And yeah, over time, I was also participating in other CTFs, and basically focused on improving the tool and make some presentations about how to use the tool for different purposes.
Okay, wow, that's really interesting. But so at what point did you start collaborating with other developers for Radare?
Yeah, I mean, the project I started 19 years ago. So
Wow.
it was, yeah, after 3 years, I decided to, that was in 2009, decided to rewrite it from scratch. Well, not from scratch, but basically reusing much, as most parts of that I could take. But I had to refactor everything because it was not modular enough for being able to reuse it and extend it properly. Basically, the main bottleneck was the scripting. And at the time, I think it was like 5 years after I started, so maybe 2011, something like that, that I started to get some contributors. But the project didn't really had like a huge community. It was basically me spending days, nights coding there, but was basically doing it for fun, and it was a mix of doing it for fun, but also for need and also for learning the stuff that I was interested on. But the community was growing quite a lot and still growing. I think that there was some issues in the community, like some discussions and some problems like claims and misunderstandings about the way that the project was managed. But I think that the project is getting over all that and starting to grow like a pretty sane community. Nowadays, there is like about 50 developers or 50 different contributors in the project. But at the end, it's the main developers is just me. So I'm the one that created the project and the one that I'm basically maintaining, doing all the releases. And for that reason is because I'm trying to reduce the tech debt as much as possible, because depending on other people for maintaining the project is not nice, because it's slowing down a lot the process. And I'm basically trying to reduce the amount of moving pieces so I can maintain the project without much effort, like simplifying the way that I can make new releases and update tools or fix vulnerabilities.
So how did you handle disagreements or conflicts with the other contributors?
Well, we tried to there was like different problems, not just from the technical point of view, but also the personal perspectives. So managing a project that works worldwide, and actually it's the only one that is handling all the things that is managing nowadays, is not easy, because there is some cultural differences, not just language barriers, because some people just don't speak English fluently, but also the way that the communication is happening is not the best for everybody. I mean, just trying to organize the development using GitHub issues is sometimes good, but sometimes it gets took forever. Same goes for chat. So not everybody works in the same way. So I end up like having some people that was coming in, coming out, and at the end, I tried to simplify as much as possible the interactions, trying to get the things merged and fix the things that was remaining for myself, so people don't get stuck trying to fix things that are easy, or something that for me are easy, but for them it will take a lot for understanding the whole thing. And so I'm trying to lower the barrier for new contributors, and I think that with the help also with the conference is also working well.
Oh, are you talking about the R2Con?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I was curious about that because I just found out about that today. Can you give a bit more of a description of what R2Con is and what its aim is?
Yeah. So R2Con is a conference around the project. So it's an excuse to meet all the developers and contributors in a single place. So I know there is a lot of people, companies, and basically using and developing and maintaining R2 for their own needs. But sometimes this is not communicated. I mean, there is so many companies using it and not telling anyone that they are using it, or people that is using it for personal projects, but this ends up like not being published anywhere. So I thought that was a good idea to improve the way that the communication with all the people that is involved in the project to meet in a single place and organize like different presentations and maybe trainings. So the whole idea behind the conference is around the community. So the ticket price is as low as possible, so we don't try to get any benefit of that. Actually, we have like a non-profit organization. I mean, the last conference was organized with a non-profit organization, so we publish all numbers and we don't get any benefit of that. Just the need for renting the place and the recording materials and all that stuff. And also all the presentations, trainings, everything is published online. So it's just a way to help the open source community around the project, which meets people from reverse engineering backgrounds to forensics to exploiting, and so on. So it's an excuse to meet, have some fun together for a few days.
You said this was for the contributors to meet up. Can anyone else join? Could I also come to R2Con?
Yeah, it's basically everybody that is using or wants to learn about reverse engineering or anything related to low level is welcome to come. I mean, the excuse is R2, so I'm organizing the conference around the project because it's a way to grow the community and so on. But basically, anything that you can do with Radare fits inside the conference. It's not just for developers. It's there is a lot of presentations about projects that companies are developing on top of that. Also, tools that are open source that are depending on our tool behind the scenes for working or solving some of the problems. There is some presentations or trainings about malware analysis. So there is a lot of different topics and a lot of different people that is coming. Actually, there was a lot of people that was interested in basic trainings, people that never used Radare again before in the past. So yeah, I think everybody's welcome. It's not, I mean, there is presentations about so many different levels. And also another thing that I like about R2Con is that it aims to be a small conference. And we don't want to be like a huge conference with very expensive and ticket entrance and so on. And we want to keep only one track. So yeah, there is only one track of presentations, so you cannot miss anything. And if you do it, you can always watch it online. We this year we organized live streaming, so you can watch it even from home. You don't need to come, but it's always funner if you join.
Oh, that's great. Do you also do other conferences? Because you spoke to me about FOSDEM in Belgium, the open source conference, but do you also go to OffensiveCon, Hexacon, or any other cons?
Yeah. I've been presenting in so many different conferences. I was also presenting at CCC, at OffensiveCon, also RootedCon, at NCN, and so on. So there is actually a lot of private conferences, also Pass the Salt in France. Yeah, I've been presenting a lot over time. But my main issue on presenting stuff is that at the end, people after presentation they end up like realizing that okay, this tool is cool, yeah, and I can do a lot of things, but I learned nothing about that. I mean, they see that they can solve some problems, but they actually don't really uh, get their hands on for making that happen. So that was one of the main reasons I ended up like deciding to organize a conference, my own conference, instead of going around presenting the tool or presenting some specific use cases for it. Because at the end, the people who wants to learn about that, they will probably have more fun spending time competing to with others in CTFs using the tool and sharing the knowledge with that.
Do you present any vulnerability researching that you've done, or is it mostly focused all about Radare? Or do you actually do VR or security research as well?
Yeah, actually, my current job position is research. So I'm a senior mobile security research engineer, which means, in short, that I'm analyzing, developing tools for analyzing mobile applications. And the main purpose in the company that I work nowadays, which is Now Secure, is to find out vulnerabilities or privacy issues for iOS and Android apps. So at the end, when I'm developing or extending the support for Radare, because all the stuff that I'm doing in Radare is open source, I mean, I'm building tools on top of Radare and Frida, mainly and most of my time. But I'm also reverse engineering and analyzing the iOS and Android kernels and operating system in order to understand some vulnerabilities or some issues. And yeah, I have some CVEs and also presented as an excuse for some practical use cases about Radare. In the Black Hat training, for example, I was showing one of these vulnerabilities. For example, one of them was a denial of service, which was actually cooling up into code execution on iOS. And well, I found out this issue on macOS, but it was also applicable to iOS. But I was not able to reproduce the crash in there. But yeah, I was basically I found this issue while developing the Bagger backend for XNU, the kernel for macOS, for Radare. And as long as I was messing around with the structures that was copying and writing the register values, I ended up realizing that I could change the values of the debug registers in ring zero, which means that I can basically set watch points or breakpoints in the kernel side from the user line without having kernel access, which means that I can basically change the control flow execution in the kernel.
Wow. When was this that you found this bug?
I think it was 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Or yeah. I also use Radare as an excuse for reverse engineering a flasher for the Nokia internet tablets. So I end up like writing a flasher for replacing the firmware. It's basically all the new open source frameworks that are depending on that flasher.
So everything you've learned or know how to do is self-taught, correct?
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
So you didn't study computer sciences at university, or maybe basic?
Nope. I was studying multimedia in the university. So I like drawing, like art, and I spend some time drawing when I have some spare time. Actually, my plan was basically to find like a career that I can mix something between art and computer science or security. But the thing is that I ended up like working for myself because I was spending the nights at home reverse engineering things or writing exploits or stuff like that for my own spare time. And the university, I was working basically like learning programming, basic C, but I already knew all that stuff. So the stuff that I was probably learning more was about using tools for making 3D animations and other stuff that are related to multimedia in the career. But for all the computer science and security things is something that I learned for myself. Actually, there was no trainings or careers at the time. I mean, I did the Cisco CCNA certification because I was also having fun and with all the networking sides of the computer science thing. But for me, it was not something I liked or really enjoyed. I was having more fun coding. But yeah, so all the stuff that I learned was basically for my own.
So I asked this question to a lot of my guests, but how did you learn reverse engineering?
Okay, so yes, I said I was on the DOS operating system. And at the time, basically my main need was being able to run some games in my old computer, and that forced me to configure the memory, like the HIMMCs and other files, or to use double space to duplicate the memory. So at the end, I was forced to understand so many different low-level concepts about the computer in order to get some games to work. And also at the time there was a lot of game sharing. It was many friends was copying the games. Oh, you can play this new game. They give me the floppy disk, and I was running this in my computer. And that was probably the worst thing that you can do if you don't want to get infected. So I was getting like different viruses in my system. So I was curious about all the viruses in. So understanding how that virus works, how that virus is copied and duplicated between different binaries and copied across different systems. It was something so interesting for me. So understanding the way that I can develop a software that is autonomous and can extend by itself was quite cool. So I decided to use the debug.com command from DOS, which was the only tool for debugging and disassembling binaries that was shipped with the operating system. And with this tool, I was basically stepping into all the problems that the antivirus detected as infected. And then I started to understand, and by basically following the control flow of the entry from the entry point, which was the code that was infected in the binary, and what the virus was doing, and how to extract the virus from inside and how to uninfect the binaries. So that was probably my first touch on analyzing low-level things and getting into the reverse engineering scene. I was basically trying. I wrote some tools in assembly that was basically identifying binaries that were infected and then marking them. So removing the virus from the binary, or marking other binaries as infected. So the virus won't do anything because they found that the binary was already infected when it was not, which was also having fun with that. So with all that learning, I was also reading a lot of zines at the time. So was 7A, 69, and many other like 29A and other zines that I was downloading from BBS. There was a lot of content about viruses and understanding how the memory structures of the DOS operating system was using in memory for keeping some functions working across different processes. Was something that was really fun for me because it was not just writing a program that does something, it was something that was able to manipulate and change the behavior of the operating system and also extend the life of one binary that can be extended and moving its own. So I was, after that, I was getting interest on all the way that the binary can be manipulated, obfuscating the code that was modifying in the binary to bypass the antiviruses. And yeah, but then I found that Windows was the next step, and I decided that I didn't had fun in that. There was a lot of macros for Word and things like that, but that was not that fun.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I see. And so, as you were developing Radare, then how did you handle the decompiler side of it that it has today? Because I'm not sure, is it still using the Ghidra decompiler, or did you build one of your own?
Actually, one of the things that I'm trying to keep external from the project is the compiler, because I think that writing a compiler is not easy, and it's probably just spending a lot of time in another single project. So what I'm trying to focus in Radar is to have like the basic tooling to write everything on top of that. And, and as long as you can extend the tool with plugins, you can use any other decompiler on top of Radar. So you can use Reddeck, you can use Ghidra, you can use R2Deck. There is also support for JADIX if you're reverse engineering Java or Android applications. Um, yeah, so I'm trying to write the interface to get different compilers to work on top of Radare. But it's true that there is also its own decompiler. So there is PDC, which is the name of the command that you need to type to get the pseudo compilation. The output is not good at all. I mean, you cannot expect or compare the output from PDC to the one that you get in Ghidra, for example. But one of the cool things of that is that it's basically expressing all the metadata that is stored inside Radare. And the good thing of that is that Radare is able to extract so many other things that other tools are not able to get. Like, for example, strings that are constructed in immediates with assembly code. So, for example, Swift and Rust binaries nowadays are performing a lot of optimizations like this, and there is a lot of strings that are created at runtime instead of referenced from memory. And also, as long as Radare is using emulation to get all the string and computed pointers inside any function, it's very easy to miss references to some external data. So using the output from PDC, you end up like getting all the real output that you can get with Radare, which is probably better for many use cases. And also it works with all the architectures. So for example, in the last R2Con, we presented the reverse engineering of an STM8 firmware, and we end up like using Radare, PDC, and R2AI to automate the whole process. So just feeding the output from PDC to a language model, it was able to get like a nice decompilation out of that. So the output of PDC contains like a linear decompilation, so you don't get loops, whiles of conditionals. You just get like labels and linear cell decompilation of all the basic blocks, which means that you can, if a language models knows how to replace a goto statement into an if or a while, or identify if this is a while or a for, it is able to create like a proper high-level representation on from that output. And the cool thing is that some models like Granite or Claude, for example, are pretty good at this when they're compiling Swift code. So you can get like a almost the same source code that you get from a high-level programming language, which IDA or Ghidra struggle with this because they end up like losing a lot of the context because there is a lot of low-level function calls referencing with the reference counting and also string managing functions that can be end up like represented in Swift in a nicer way. So R2AI is probably the easiest way to get full decompilation on top of PDC, which means that you can use it for any single architecture. Even, I mean, if there is just basic self-decompilation support in Radare, which means that it works with all architectures, and is able to decompile in any programming language. So you can get the compilation in Swift, or you can get the compilation in Python or the language that you like, even in Bash.
So you're using a combination of decompiler and AI then to get the decompilation of a binary.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I don't see or hear about much binary analysis tools that use AI. I think Binary Ninja has a plugin for that that's pretty recent, but Ghidra or IDA Pro, I don't think they're on that boat yet.
Yeah, there is some plugins for IDA and Ghidra. Binary Ninja is probably the one that they are promoting it more. But in R2, I started the plugin like more than a year and a half, something like this, ago. And I ended up like actually rewriting it in different languages. So I started in Python, then moved to JavaScript, and now it's fully written in C. And actually, you cannot use a language model for everything because at the end it's very easy that the language model will lie about the results. So it's not like a compiler that will work always in the same way and you will get the same stable results. Language models have so many different and small variations that can end up like giving the wrong output. Not just for the compilation, because for example, there is so many other use cases in for using language models for reverse engineering. And one of them is the compilation, but you can probably use a language model to give or to name a function automatically. So instead of having to find like a best name for a function in order to get better understanding or understanding the arguments that are getting passed and set the function or the variable names, you can just depend on a language model to do that. And this will work well for some cases, but for others can be a mess. And the reason for using R2AI or starting the project was basically to understand and to play with that. They end up like depending on using a language model for the use case that you need. And for example, other use cases can be find vulnerabilities or even automate the whole process. So actually, Cryptax is playing a lot with that recently. She has been writing some blog posts about using R2AI for solving crackmes. And Dinakov was another guy from New York who was presenting at R2Con that he implemented the initial support for auto mode, which means that you basically open a crackme with Radare and you ask the R2AI to solve it. And as long as the language model knows which comments must be used for solving the problem, it will be typing the comments for you, analyzing the output, running the next comments, and creating the plan for finding the final solution, and then writing some scripts in Python, for example, for verifying that the output is correct or not. And I think that's quite fun. At the end, it's a nice playground for experimenting, and also it's also cool to see how different language models are learning Radare. Because when I started the project, I had to basically fit all the comments that and how these comments work to let the language model understand how to use it. And nowadays, most of them, or at least the biggest ones, understand how to use Radare. Which is pretty cool because this means that they're basically feeding their data sets with the Radare book or blog post from Radare and so on. And yeah, that's it. A pretty interesting project that we can all learn from.
Do you also use AI in your daily life, or is it just support for AI that you like to focus on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not using it for everything, but I think that it can be helpful for example, for starting new projects or code that or you wanna function that implements something, or you wanna write a test suite for a specific function, or
scripting.
yeah, it's helping me a lot on finding ways to accelerate my development, and also I'm using it for getting feedback because I also learned that it was faster and easier for me to get some feedback from a language model rather than from the community, because making a poll or asking in the chat was taking days or even weeks to get like an agreement on which was the best option for or naming for one specific API. And using language models, I can get like much better ideas in less time. So I think they're helpful, and but I also understand the inconvenience and the problems that they can introduce. But I think they end up being a nice tool that we need to learn how to use.
Yeah. So, because you were saying that it's more helpful to ask AI than to ask the collaborators for specific input. What has your experience been collaborating with others in the open source world?
Yeah, it was. I mean, depending on the topic, sometimes it's hard to find someone that understands the whole problematic. Or I mean, when you are trying to solve a specific problem, it's easy to get some feedback because you know who you should be asking that question, or which is the feedback that this person will be giving it to you. But at the end, when you are developing a project that needs to be used by many different people and it's covering so many different topics, I think it's important to get larger feedback. I mean, you need to get like more comments from different people, and at the end, you cannot get the good quality responses from everybody because not everybody have the time to spend analyzing the whole problem, like reading the code, understanding which is the problematic, and giving you like 3-4 different solutions for the problem. So at the end, we end up like finding out that the best way to work was to move forward. And if the solution works and there is no drawbacks, just use that one as a solution. The problem is that as long as the project evolves, this ends up into something that you need to change over time. So, for example, IDA, there is a lot of complaints in the naming and the APIs that are shipped in the project. So, if you want to write like a plugin for IDA, you end up like realizing that the APIs are confusing, and the reason is that they cannot change the APIs because that will imply that they are breaking backward compatibility, and some customers won't be able to use the plugins or need to write. So finding a way that everybody's happy with the way that the functions and the comments and how to script the tooling is not easy. And the main problem that I found is that most people, as long as the Radare is big, most people don't have the whole perspective of the project. So what I find out is that making questions about how to develop something ends up into silence or ends up into a very specific feedback of one problem that they are facing, which is good, but it also is limiting me a little bit. That's why I end up like realizing that using language models to get like more feedback or different random ideas for solving a specific problem was helping me a lot for understanding the problem.
But so how difficult is it to maintain a fairly popular open source project? Is the community respectful?
There was, I mean, there is over time there was like different feeling on that. So depending on the community, because for example in the IRC there was a lot of flames and there was a lot of ins and outs. And also in Twitter, there was a lot of flames also for random things that was probably not easy to manage. And as I said before, the understanding of the way that the project was developed and evolving was not easy. So managing the community is one of the biggest problems, and trying to get good feedback from everybody is impossible, and also you cannot make everyone happy. So I try to get the minimum things to be agreed by everybody. So, for example, I cannot help or I cannot I don't have time for making like the graphical user interface. So I spend most of my time in the core. And some people can get angry because they don't have a specific feature working. And at the end, you need to learn how to manage this kind of requests, because I'm not doing this for money. I'm getting paid for developing the tool. So at the end, it's my personal project. I want to have fun. I want to spend time doing things that I like. And if people get mad about something not implemented in the way they like, I learned that the best way is to basically tell them to contribute, or just tell them to fill the request and get some feedback from the community. If someone want to contribute, they can always help on that. But at the end, trying to please everyone is not easy. So it was difficult to, at some point, to find like a balance on this.
You're the main maintainer, but is there anyone else that's like right below you, or how many other significant maintainers are there? Are you comfortable to let other people take ownership of some areas of the project?
Yeah, sure. I didn't have problem in having other people to contribute in or to manage specific parts of the project. Actually, many of the, for example, R2 Ghidra was developed by different people and maintained by different people. Same goes for Yaito, which is the graphical interface. But at the end, what I think it's important is to have like a good communication, have a way that we can basically discuss about the requirements for the project, and a way to contribute to be easy for everybody. So basically all the projects under the Radare umbrella must be fitting together. and have like a similar feeling. And this is something that needs to be agreed by everybody. And sometimes this is not easy. This is the reason why some of these projects moved away from Radare and they are maintained in a separate repo. And I'm totally fine with that. And I'm happy that. So actually, what I'm happy is that what I did in Radare is something that was valued by many people. And in the sense that some people end up taking the code and forking it, or making some new projects like writing the whole Radare project in Rust and things like that, because that's stuff that I will probably won't do. But it means that the project is valuable enough for replicating it or maintaining it, focusing on different specific features or functionalities, or at least managing it in the way that they feel that it's better. But yeah, at the end, I would love to have more people managing the project. But probably the main issue is that I cannot find, or it's very difficult to find people who likes to develop in C. And the people who do that is probably people that is not having enough time nowadays for maintaining a project of this size.
Are there any regrets or technical decisions that you are kind of paying for these days?
Yeah, I mean, for example, I don't regret picking C, the programming language that the whole project is written in. I mean, for example, there is some regrets in some decisions that I made at the beginning, but the problem is that as long as the project was evolving depending on the needs, because I didn't thought on all the problematics that the code was needing to solve before starting the code. So I end up like realizing that some parts need to be rewritten. Some things like, for example, thread safety is probably one of the biggest issues in the code base nowadays, because when I started doing that, computers had only one CPU and was probably not. Making programs multi-thread was not really beneficial at all, because you was spending more time blocking different threads and making the whole code much more complex, just because of the complexity of deadlocks and so on. But nowadays the whole scope is much different, and trying to rewrite the code in a way that can be used by different CPUs and so on, it requires a lot of maintenance. So also another problem that I see is that every time that I want to change something that is affecting a lot of code, it's so expensive and boring, because I end up, like, for example, for binary file formats, there is over 50 different file formats. So if I change the way that the functions are working there, it means that I need to write 50 different plugins or things like that. So it's not easy to change data structures that are tied to the internal core representation, which I find out that this is something much more important nowadays than something I was caring when I started. So, for example, maintaining projects or being able to save the state of your project and share that with other people is something that I was not caring at all, because most of my work was basically focused on small tasks and small binaries, or at least binaries that I was only analyzing for a specific use case, not analyzing the whole binary or the whole firmware just in a single session. So saving and restoring projects was something that was working, but probably not working for everybody. And that's all the things that I would like to solve this year. I mean, the project is quite stable, and I have the roadmap in my head for end up like having proper support for projects, also proper support for changing all the data structures without having to spend much time on rewriting everything. But yeah, there is always new things that you end up learning, and new data structures that can be speeding up a lot the way that you use the data in binaries, because at the end there is a lot of information that you need to store, and you end up like having a lot of memory usage depending on that, and having to, depending on the data structures that you use, the performance changes a lot. And if you use Radare for batch analysis, which is something that most people do nowadays, for some specific use cases, this is very expensive. Just fixing few things will make it much faster.
So you were talking about a roadmap for this year. Do you have any new exciting features coming for Radare?
Yeah, I mean, probably the projects thing is the biggest thing. The R2AI plugin is something I want to finish, or at least get it in a stable state that I can rely on for different use cases. Also for the UI, I would like to make everything asynchronous and being able to use graphical and scripting and command line plugins in the same way. This is probably the three most important things I would like to work on this year. Because, for example, I introduced JavaScript as a scripting language. There is an API which is very similar for the one in Frida. So you can reuse some scripts from Frida from static to dynamic. And you can also use that in R2Frida, which is a plugin that allows you to inject code and analyze applications using Frida and Radare at the same time. But the thing is that scripting with JavaScript was helping a lot on developing some of the features that and playing without having to spend time on writing in C or compiling plugins and things like that. So JavaScript was helping a lot on speeding up some of the features and also writing plugins. But the problem is that if you write a plugin in JavaScript, for example, and the command line, if you try to use that from the user interface, you won't get like a visual prompt for getting feedback from the command line. So I'm developing a set of basic widgets that work in the command line as well as in the UI. And the idea is that having the same API from JavaScript, you can have the same behavior and reuse the same plugins in the UI and the CLI.
Okay. Looking back, what are you most proud of about Radare2?
What I'm probably more proud of is that I managed to get motivation from nowhere to continue working on the project. It's been my motto for a long time. It was helping me in different ways to get motivated into different topics. I learned a lot on while developing and analyzing binaries with the tool. And it was basically opened me the door to meet people, travel around the world, and get different jobs that are related to what I can do with the tool. So yeah, probably getting the mood to continue developing and improving the tool just for fun. It was probably the thing that I'm more proud of it.
Yeah, I am very impressed that it started off just as a single use project or product maybe, and then it got turned into this huge popular reverse engineering tool used by so many people out there as well. So kudos, that's very cool. Very impressive.
Thanks.
If you had to rewrite it, would you pick another language?
The reason for picking C was mainly portability. And there is still some targets that I cannot use any other language. So like old EDX machines, like Unix servers and some embedded systems, old mobile phones or routers and things like that are something that you cannot develop in any other thing than C. Actually, the reason why I keep using makefiles and writing it in C is basically for portability. But probably the language that fits better in my head that I can extend the tool will be probably Zeek.
Zeek?
Zeek, yes. It's a low-level programming language. It's not new. I think it was like 5 years ago, something like this. Still under developing.
Oh.
I try to follow the development, and there is some nice projects written on top of it, like the Ghost TTI console, and also Boon, the Node.js-like project that they're written in Zig. So there is like some real use cases for that. But the thing is that the language is still not stable, and they're still developing things. But it's everything that I read from the language is stuff that I like. I mean, it's things that all the complaints or problems that I find in C are things that are solved in Zig. So basically the sign issues. And actually, I'm not very happy about the last decisions that are taken in the C standard committee. So there are things in the last C23 standard that are things that that are not backward compatible, and they are breaking the way that the language was designed from the beginning. But it's true that there is so many moving things that are very easy to introduce vulnerabilities or bugs in C that I will probably not have to spend that much time in here. But yeah, probably doing the writing or extending or writing parts of it in Zig will be a good way to go. And actually, I was starting to mess with Rust. But the problem is that in Rust, if you rewrite everything in Rust, is fun, or not probably. I won't say it's fun, but it's fine. But if you need to depend on external libraries that are written in not Rust language, it's becoming a huge pain. So maintaining a project that has written in Rust and other languages is not. And one of the main proofs is the kernel. There was a lot of flames and discussions because the introduction of the Rust programming language in the kernel. And it's actually a language that I don't find fan of developing. I mean, it's too strict for my taste, and I end up like spending more time fighting the compiler than fighting the actual problem.
Yeah. Well, you seem to spend quite a lot of time working on Radare. How do you manage your work life, your Radare life, and your personal life?
So I end up like removing a lot of sleep hours just for developing Radare. So yeah, actually, my daughter was unable to sleep more than 3 hours for 10 years. So I have like a very light sleep. So I was waking up and just coding after putting her to sleep again. So I was trying to push myself to get things out of Radare because I was having fun with that. But yeah, I mean, also at work, I tried to find jobs that fit well with the project. So things that places that they allow me to do open source, or they can use Radare for it. So I can spend some company time developing the tool. And yeah, personal life is always good to get some disconnection. I mean, every time that I get some weekend free of computers, I come back with more motivation to come back and get stuff done. So I think I mean, I was probably more obsessed at the beginning, and nowadays I'm trying to be more relaxed and focus on myself rather than developing. But also, I think that the project is more stable and it doesn't require that much attention than it was a few years ago.
Yeah, so you said you started this 19 years ago. This must be one of the longest open source project that is still maintained by the original creator, right?
Never thought about that. Yeah, could be.
Because I know Metasploit is also a very old and still maintained project, but it has been taken by I don't know who took like ownership now, but
I
you're
think it was Rapid7.
yeah, oh yeah, correct, yeah. So Rapid7 took ownership of Metasploit, but you are still the original maintainer and creator 19 years later. That's a lot of
Yeah,
motivation there.
yeah, indeed. Yeah, actually, most of the projects that I mean, most of the projects started as open source, end up like being bought by the company. Um, Radare I consider Radare free software, not open source, and also I will never consider selling the project to any company. And also, I think that the niche of the reverse engineering scene is quite small, and all the other alternatives are not fitting the same philosophy. And I think that keeping that in a stable situation, like in the sense that you follow some ideas and you try to stick to them is important. And making some parts of the project open source, or selling the project to a company, or making a product on top of that. I mean, not on top of that, because I think it's totally fine to make commercial products on top of Radare. But commercializing what the project will be breaking the philosophy. And as long as all the other alternatives are completely following a different philosophy, this is probably the main difference compared to other ones.
What's the philosophy?
So there is like different philosophies behind the project. One of them is trying to be Unix-like, which means that handling everything as a file, making all the scripts reusable and plain text that you can basically not depend on binary analysis tools for modifying a script, or using like privative file formats for storing the data. But also there is other philosophies that are relying on the way that the project is developed, and also that I want to keep that free software, which means that it's LGPL, and you can modify, and if you modify some stuff, you are forced to publish it if you are publishing a project or that is depending on that modification, which means that for me it's something important, because it is this and that, like contributing or improving the whole situation of the quality of the project. Because it's helping everybody to if somebody finds a bug, they will need to publish the fix and not keep it in their own branch. Also, about the security philosophy, I'm happy about the full disclosure, which means that if you find a vulnerability or a issue in Radare, I want everybody to know that. I don't want to have like a private CVE with a GPC key exposing that vulnerability to only the developers or the security team of the project, because I think that the whole security or the whole way that the security vulnerabilities are handled are kind of rotten. There is a lot of monetary interest behind that, and this is in the expenses of the security of the software that users end up using. So I want everybody to use the Git. So I try to fix all the vulnerabilities as soon as possible. So my deadline is 24 hours. And so every time that someone finds a bug or a vulnerability, I fix that as soon as possible. So you can find all the crashes and all the bugs publicly and clearly describe it in the Git log. So I don't like vulnerabilities that are hidden or only shown to few people, because I think that this is not fair for the community. I don't think there is any other project that is trying to follow it in the same way. And that's something that burns me a little bit, because I was getting annoyed by having or realizing that some people had exploits for some tools that are open source, and they were not publishing it or not sharing that. And actually, fuzzing Radare is one of the things that I try to spend some time. I have machines that are fuzzing different comments, file formats, and binaries, and every time that I get a crash, I get a mention in the Fediverse, a private mention from the bot that is fuzzing, and I fix that as soon as possible. So I think that security is important, but it must be taken in the more open way, because lying to the users that or having people think that the software they are using is safe just because they don't see anything in the Git log, or they don't see anything publicly in the chat or anywhere is not nice. So yeah, this is some of the philosophies I try to follow.
Coming back to something that you said earlier, you were talking about this is not commercial, but did anyone already come to you to try to buy Radare off of you?
Nope,
No one. And
nope.
but if they did, then you would never consider selling it.
Correct. I mean, I already had this decided from the beginning, but this never happened, so I didn't have to say no.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised in 19 years that no one came to buy it. This is a question that has nothing to do with this. I'm just really impressed, but how did you learn English? Because you're really fluent.
But just by myself. I mean, I learned English at school, but didn't really help me a lot. So I was basically learning English by traveling and also at work. So I work in a company from the US. So I have like weekly meetings, and this was helping me a lot in the fluently. But yeah, I still think I have a lot to learn and practice. But thanks.
Are there like any last things that you would like to say? Any motivational quotes for the listeners, or something that you would want to share about yourself? Maybe like a fun fact.
Yeah, I will say if you want to learn or contribute to the project, don't be afraid of the learning curve, which is kind of something that everyone is mentioning every time that they talk about Radare. And I mean, for me, or at least in my experience teaching Radare, people don't really need more than 1 hour of practicing to get used to the tool. And to develop, there is a lot of presentations from Ertucon and trainings giving some the basic hints to start contributing. And you don't really need to understand the whole project to improve or fix a bug in one specific part. So I encourage everyone to join the Discord or the Telegram channels because there is so many different people trying also to learn, and this will probably reduce the stress or the fear on getting into the project to start contributing and learning new things. And at the end, it's a different workflow, and I think that nowadays most people end up like downloading graphical apps and using the mouse for solving things. But using the command line is something that when you understand the way it works, it's helping you a lot on reducing the time that you need to solve a problem.
Do you have any funky stories or anecdotes about users or contributors, or just anyone that's come up to you at a conference?
Yeah, I mean, there was always some interesting meetups with people after my presentations. I always enjoy talking to the people that comes to me to make me questions and so on. But I always find fun when I see some people that I clearly see that they are like coming from the secret services, because the way that make the questions and what the things that they're interested on. So yeah, I have some fun stories on people making me some picky questions on the reasons behind I do things and stuff like that. But yeah, I will say some questions about uh, when Ghidra was released, for example. Uh, there was some smiles on their face, asking me my thoughts on the open sourcing the Ghidra project and how that will be affecting the Radare community. And my answer was, I'm totally happy about that. I'm so happy to see more open source around the internet. And I don't think that will be affecting the real Radare user base because it's not the same philosophy. Yeah, but that probably was not what they will be expecting to. But yeah, I was happy that at the end, Ghidra was helping a lot of people to get into reverse engineering. And at the end, the amount of people using Radare was probably lowering, but the few people that remains there is the people who really love the project and the workflows that they can follow there. So yeah, that was probably a fun moment.
Oh my, secret services coming up to you. That must be funny. When I go to conferences, everyone also thinks I'm a spy because I'm very outgoing and I'm very curious. So I ask questions. And at CCC this year, man, it was like 5 people or something asked me or asked other people if I was a spy, and at some point I was just so fed up with it that I made a T-shirt that says "I'm not a spy," and I just wore it for the rest of the conference.
Yeah, actually being outside the scene and coming from nothing and starting to ask people questions about specific things makes you suspicious. And I don't know if you know the Spot the Fed competition in the DEF CON.
No, I have never been to DEF CON.
Yeah, so at DEF CON there is like a competition to spot the federals, and so basically when there is like a competition to for the people to identify who is coming from the Secret Services or the FBI or someone, and spotting them in the conference and mark them in the way that hey, and then there is like a prize for the one who spotted and the one who was spotted. Yeah, it's great that you make questions. I mean, probably is the best way to learn. And if they're silly, the beginning when I started to learn, I was making questions in BBS and IRC, and sometimes I read some of the logs of the questions that I was doing at the time, and I was thinking, okay, I was so silly. But yeah, it's just the process of learning that makes you realize that yourself from the past was not understanding as much things, but at the end is the best way for learning. So making questions is even if make you suspicious is probably one of the best ways to learn.
Yeah, and it's true. And when you look back at your previous questions, you're like, wow, I've actually come quite far, and I've learned so much in a set amount of years. So it's also quite motivational to keep going as well. I
Mm.
remember when I first started working in pen testing, and I go back to like either the first report that I've written or the first test that I've done. I'm like, wow, I've actually come pretty far.
Yeah, it's it's so nice to see the evolution of yourself, and it's great that you continue evolving and growing. Actually, one of the things that I enjoyed a lot at the beginning, well, actually, I'm still doing it, but not that much because I don't have so much time as before. It was basically reading things that I totally don't understand anything about it, because it was interesting for me to understand a new concept, but I was not being able to tie that to any other knowledge that I had at the time. But years later, or sometime later, when doing other stuff, I end up like realizing that the how can I mix one concepts with other ones? It's like fitting all the pieces of the puzzle together and realizing that what you read that was completely useless in the past is it was helpful at some point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I feel like look for you looking back on the early beginnings of Radare, when you look back at that today, you must feel like a proud daddy.
Yeah, actually, last year was like 18, so yeah, now can drive, it can go to the prison. Yeah, it's now. I mean, maybe sometimes will be self-autonomous and being able to auto patch and auto develop itself, and that will be completely
Moving out.
an extent between
Thank you so much for this conversation. It was quite interesting as well, and got a lot of information on Radare and the early beginnings. So very cool.
Thanks to you for the call. I think it was pretty nice conversation. I also enjoyed the questions and the ambient. So yeah.
Are you going to any conference this year?
Uh, I was planning to go to the FOSDEM, but it's a bit late now to
Mm.
plan this. So yeah, maybe at CCC at the end of the year, because it's been like some years that I was planning to go, but I was always skipping it for one reason or another one. But yeah, I don't have any other plans except for R2 Anyway, congratulations for the podcast. I was really enjoying the other interviews you published.
Oh,
So good luck with the project.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Same for you.
Bye.